Hi, this is Politics by Jake. I'm Jake, and I'm welcome. And today we're diving into a looming financial disaster. A new bill just passed. You all know about it. H.R. 1, the big, beautiful bill, supposedly, which is the big, bastardized, awful, unbelievably bad bill, is going to add $6 trillion to it's a budget bill that's supposed to save money. It's supposed to curtail waste, but it's going to add $6 trillion to our $37 trillion national debt, while a $715 trillion derivatives casino threatens to collapse the dollar of itself. But that's just the start. We're also going to talk about the Epstein situation, and we're going to unpack Trump's harsh criticism of his own MAGA base amid the Epstein fallout, which amazingly is a modern echo of Hitler's bunker rhetoric, blaming his own people for weakness. We'll also explore the rise of social fascism, which is a thing. Yes, it's a thing, and its impact on American politics, plus the surprising significance, troubling, I would say, of Zoran Mamdani's mayoral campaign. Stick with me for the full story behind these crises and what they mean to you, and this is Politics by Jake. And of course, on Politics by Jake, what we do is we have a Monday and Friday show at 7 a.m., and it's also, of course, a podcast. I mean, this is, after all, the third decade of the 21st century, and we have such things, so you don't have to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. For those of you who are listening right now at 7 o'clock in the morning, thank you, welcome, but you don't have to do that. Go to kcaradio.com, check the Monday and Friday schedule, and find me. I'm right there next to Stephanie Miller. She's on at 6. I'm on at 7 in the morning. And you can click on that. My beautiful face is there, and you can see all of my shows, and you can see the show that we're doing right now. And when Monday comes around again, you'll be able to see that show too. And you can download that, and you can listen to it whenever you want. And what we try to do is number one, we try to do political education. And number two, we try to give a kind of a summary, kind of an overview, if you will, of what's going on in the country and what's going on in the world. And this is just, there's so much going on. There's a number of singularities that are occurring here that are just incredibly dangerous things. It's difficult to keep up on it, but we try. That's what the show is about. That's what we try to do. And so with that, let's begin. And I want to start by talking about this looming financial disaster. And I talked about it on Friday's show, but I didn't get to it all. And it's so crucial that it really needs to be gone over again. And so that's what we're leading with. So I talked about on Monday's show, I talked about how Trump wants to muscle in on the Federal Reserve, which I said, if he does, he'll find out who the real owners of this country are. George Carlin, who I don't know, is as much of a prophet, I would think, of things American and of things worldwide as you would hope to hear, is someone who talked about this. He talked about the illusion of choice. He talked about the real owners of this country. And really, Wall Street, the people that George Carlin said were the financial criminals who run Wall Street, considers that the Fed is there. And they're not going to want Trump to mess with it. And it's their cash cow they want hands off. And that's what George Carlin meant when he said the people who run this country. They run this country, and they don't want him touching that. So once you go into this world of the Federal Reserve, then you're playing with fire, aren't you? And what you're courting is a breakdown crisis, and that's just exactly what's happening. As I said, the last time a major world currency went under was according to certain criteria. It was the British pound in September of 1931, after the Austrian and German and Dutch continental European banking crises. And this, by the way, is what caused the Depression. This is what caused, in 1929, this was a severe recession. But going off the gold standard in 1931, that's really what created a worldwide depression. So let's go into that. The pound, which was still on, it had been restored to the gold standard, by the way. It was kept way too high by Sir Winston Churchill, who at that time was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and basically he was the finance minister. And because the United States had been manipulated into doing things with the dollar that they shouldn't have been doing, basically, what happened was there was a run on the gold backing of the pound, and the Bank of England with, I guess it would be Ramsay MacDonald at this as the prime minister. What they did was they stopped gold payment and the US dollar bill of exchange, drawn sometimes on New York, but often on London, which is the dollar or the euro dollar center. So that's the current situation. If you fire Powell, I mean, it's just like this. If you fire Powell, Trump saw that the nearest hint of what would happen. I think by now, Wall Street and London and the other holders of U.S. Treasury bonds, Treasury bills, notes, Treasury bonds, they all believe, if included, that Trump is a taco and that he'll never fire Powell. And he would then replace him again with one of these raving, essentially anti-Fed and MAGA people. We'll see if it happens. And I assure you, if it happens, you'll know it. What would happen then, though? Well, as we know, the U.S. dollar has been weak all year. In other words, the Trump administration coincides with a phase of weakness of the dollar. The index, the dollar index, is down for all of 2025. In other words, the dollar, that means is the dollar compared to a basket of similar currencies or other currencies, is down. So you would begin to get a decline in the dollar at that point. You would get a flight of liquidity out of the dollar and into what? Swiss franc, quite possibly the euro, maybe the Japanese yen, some others. A lot of liquidity. Giant sucking sound. Liquidity begins to leave the United States. Foreign cash takes flight. The stock market begins to crash. This is what can happen. And before too long, as we saw in the month of May, not so merry in the month of May, because there was a stock market decline in the midst of a dollar decline. And that led to a crisis in the Treasury bond market. And I say the bond market, it means bills, it means notes, it means bonds. And these are all ranging from 1 month, 30 days to 30 years. That whole array in different degrees. A bond market panic would then endanger, because it's the only way to finance world trade. That's why they hold bond markets, because they're financing everything. That's why somebody said when England went off the gold standard in 1931 that it was the end of the world, because at that time all credit and financing in the world was done based on a bill of credit backed by the pound sterling. And that wasn't, and somebody even said when they went off the gold standard, they said it was the end of the world. They were right. It was the end of the world as far as that was concerned, because there was no standard for finance. There was no standard for borrowing anymore. So the bond market would then endanger, it would be the only way to finance world trade. And these BRICS, of course, they're a joke. Medvedev, he had his little coin. Remember that? He got a coin. He said, let's make this the reserve currency of the world, shall we? Once again, you have Treasury bond market, which routinely does 1 to 2 trillion a day, and which can, without batting an eye, escalate that up to 4, 5, maybe even 7 trillion if you have a kind of a crisis. And the idea is that anyone can park money there, can earn a decent return, and is going to be able to turn that into cash dollars if they need it. And nobody else has that. Don't listen to people who say they have it, because nobody has it except the United States. The European Union, they don't have it. Japan, no. Russia, forget Russia. Nobody in the BRICS. It's all just talk. And at this point, let's take a break. And this is Politics by Jake, and we will be right back. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And we were talking about the coming financial crisis, the liquidity, the weak dollar. And so we were talking about the BRICS, which is basically the third world, and how they talk about getting rid of the reserve currency. They're just talking. We don't want this to happen. Of course, that would mean that the reserve currency role of the dollar would be over. And all the BRICS, that great global south, these postures, they would say, oh, let's get rid of the dollar. Well, if you do that, what's going to replace it? Don't you think it's better And I'm hep to what people say about the Fed. It's a scandal. It's nothing but a scandal. And it has been since its inception. But don't you think it's better, for the sake of the world, to have a reserve currency, irrespective of which one it is to begin with? Because nobody else can do this, mind you. Nobody else comes close. So you probably ought to keep the dollar as a reserve currency, unless you've got, something better ready to go. And believe me, when I say this, you don't. So that's why at the moment, you'd have to say a Trump puppet ideologue, a stooge of Trump, filled to the gills with this MAGA doctrine, which I guess means that central banks are bad, and they can be bad. I'm for a national bank, not a central bank. They can be bad. But there are things that are worse. And what would be worse is this. A Trump stooge replacing Powell would be worse, because it would be accompanied by a loss of confidence worldwide in the U.S. dollar, in the U.S. government, in the U.S. stock market, and in the U.S. Treasury securities. When they say $37 trillion, those are Treasury bonds. When they talk about the trust fund of Social Security, those are Treasury bonds. Listen to me now. Follow me as I go through this. Social Security, Treasury bonds. Medicaid, Treasury bonds. Medicare, Treasury bonds. Not as big, but I think there still is one. They're all Treasury bonds. So you don't want any of this to happen, because that's the basis of all these programs. So let's see. One or two of the less defensive economists point out that Turkey is a recent example of a country where a doctrinaire dictator wanted to violate. He wanted to go against economic orthodoxy, and I think it's fine to go against economic orthodoxy. I don't hold any particular brief for the Federal Reserve. I think it's nothing but a scandal. But you've got to pick the points where you diverge, and it's not all points. If orthodox economics says the sun will come up tomorrow, that's not where you want to start. You remember the economists wanted to keep the interest rates high, right? They wanted to fight inflation. I think that they were up to maybe 20% inflation. The economists said the only way now is to give the bounds of the art ways out of it. And we can talk about those. But they said you can't lower the rates. You've got to increase the rates. And the president of Turkey, who is except Aragon or Erdogan, it's a G, but it's kind of pronounced, it's Erdogan. And he said no. He said, no, I want to be popular. I want to have easy money. So their inflation rate went up to 80%. 80%! The Turkish pound, sometimes called the lira, it's still a basket case. You're not hearing about this, but you'll hear about it on Politics by Jake. It has gotten better. So that's the leading example of somebody who thought that he could lower interest rates in the face of inflation. And of course, we've got inflation coming back now. And the interesting thing is that Powell has said to Trump, I can't lower interest rates because of your crackpot tariffs, which are creating inflation. That would be a double whammy. It would be a double dose of inflation. And that would have some of these awful consequences, which I have just been discussing. Now, there is a way out of this, of course. You might call it a two-tiered credit system. It's cheap government credit for production only. And when I talk about that, I mean tangible, physical production, farming, agriculture, absolutely. Mining, rare earths, copper, all the other things. Cheap government credit for those. Cheap government credit for manufacturing, for tangible physical production, for hard commodities. Not crypto. There's a bill right now in the legislature with regard to crypto. Not crypto. Not derivatives. Not hedge fund hyenas. Not the activities of zombie bankers. Not the crazed exponents of private equity, looting, breaking up corporations, selling the pieces, and financing all that with a junk bond-assisted kind of hostile takeover. This is what Mitt Romney was involved with Bain Capital back in the 90s. That's probably old hat by now, but you get the idea. By the way, crypto, world crypto, now 4 trillion, up 11% in 1 week recently. But it jumps around. It goes up and down, 5 to 10% from week to week. Derivatives, in terms of their notional value, in other words, the value of underlying asset, we have in this world $715 trillion of derivatives. This is a cancerous mass of speculative financial instruments. And they demand income streams. They have to have them. They all want to be interest-bearing or to have some income associated with them. And the question is, what are you going to do about that? Because when this blows, and it is going to blow, it's going to be a colossal earthquake. And this is the thing that I come back to, and you've heard me talk about it before, but I'm going to talk to you about it again. The Biden administration had embarked on a very effective, I think, very well-designed program of slowly deflating this monstrous tumor. President Biden was well aware that we had really unbelievable deficits, this crypto cancer going on worldwide where nothing is produced. Nothing is produced. Crypto is just smoke and mirrors. What's the common denominator of crypto? Derivatives, junk bonds, financial speculation, hedge funds, private equity. They produce nothing. All they do is generate demands on profit streams coming out ultimately of real, tangible, physical production, mining, manufacturing, farming, construction. In other words, the financialization of the world, the Wall Street casino economy, and so forth. This is the underlying problem. This is essentially the root cause of everything. And the only way out of that is to start using public money. You can do it on budget. Yes, you can do that. That's how Biden was doing it. You need an industrial policy to promote the return of tangible, physical production, mining, like I said, manufacturing, farming, agriculture, so on and so forth. You've got to have that being built up so you can increase the relative size of the productive sector compared to the parasitical sector. Because once the panic starts, the speculative sector deflates rather rapidly, and you get into huge sums. Not so many years ago, we had a crisis in the repo market. Remember that one? Huge amounts. Then we had a banking crisis. Silicon Valley Bank and a couple of other banks that blew under Biden. Those tremors, they're not forgotten. The problems underlying that, they are still there. So this is the explosive material that Trump is playing with. And, Trump is somebody who uses bankruptcy as a business plan. That's part of his business plan. So we also need to be aware of, so in other words, I'm not sure that this is the kind of guy we want at the helm with this kind of a situation. Now, we also need to be aware that the forces of crypto are now in the political realm. Like I said, there's a bill in Congress right now. They're stronger than they've ever been. And like I said, that would be the crypto bill. Currently, I think it's in the House. And it is, I think it's my impression, although I haven't studied it, it's a miserable excuse for the kinds of stringent regulation that you would need in something so parasitical, so cancerous, so alien to the real economy, so much appealing to the elitist, parasitical, predatory elements in the United States economy. I would say no. Now, in the Biden administration, you had Gary Gensler at the Securities and Exchange Commission. He was hostile to crypto, and I would even be more hostile. In other words, I would say we're going to shut this down. This is parasitical. This is generating greater potential for economic panic. But there you go. And at this point, let's take a break. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake. Do you like what you hear right now? Support the real talk then. Go to patreon.com/politics by Jake right now. Every dollar helps fight the noise. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. In this next segment, it's going to include a couple of things. I may talk about some polling that's been happening that shows that Trump is not doing very well. He's underwater in just about everything that there is. But I want to talk about this recent thing. It's kind of an update of the Epstein situation. But what it is it's kind of a comparison. Because one of the things you have to understand is that Trump is a fascist. And he's most certainly a fascist because he tried to overthrow the government. He tried to overthrow it violently, and he tried to overthrow it legislatively. And those are the hallmarks of a fascist. It's exactly what Hitler did. It's exactly what Hitler did. From the 1923 Munich Putsch, which was a violent attempt to overthrow the government, to the taking over of and assuming dictatorial powers in 1933, 1934. And this is just precisely the way the Nazis reacted. It's precisely the way the fascists under Mussolini reacted. And it deserves to be addressed, and it deserved to be called out. And the methods and the modus operandi of the fascists in doing this also needs to be called out. So that's what I want to talk about just for a moment here. So in examining the authoritarian tendencies, and people call them authoritarian. I really don't like that. I have to apologize. The script person the production assistant put authoritarian. This is fascism, okay? That's what it is. It's fascism. We're going to talk about social fascism a little bit later in the show. But so let me restate that and say, in examining the rising fascist tendencies in today's political landscape, comparisons between Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler frequently arise. I'm one of the ones saying it. One striking similarity lies in their use of aggressive rhetoric aimed at consolidating power by dividing their followers. Recently, and this is basically the thing, I mean, much could be said, as you know, about the Epstein situation, but it's something that was known. Everybody knew that Trump was on the plane. People in the know, they all knew these things. Why it's coming up now, I don't know, but it's coming up amongst his base, who some have likened to idiots, and Trump actually has done this. And let me just get into this. I don't know why it has taken this long for his base to understand this. And it's weird that it takes basically pedophilia or the exploitation of underage minors for sexual purposes to bring the MAGA base out. I don't know. But that's what it is. So, okay. So we've known about this since like 2015 or so. But recently, Trump publicly called former supporters who questioned or wavered in their loyalty because of the Trump-Epstein affair weaklings and idiots. And this strategy of vilifying dissenters isn't new. Traudl Junge, and I've read her memoirs or parts of her memoirs, she was Hitler's private secretary. And she described how Hitler would single out those who questioned him, labeling them as weak or traitors. And she said he did this in order to maintain a fearful and compliant inner circle. She recalled And this is a quote, he had this way of singling out those who questioned him, calling them weak or traitors. It was a method to keep his circle tight and fearful. And like Trump's recent rhetorics, calling wavering supporters weaklings and idiots, Hitler's us versus them mentality cast any doubt as far as betrayal is concerned. Junge explained Hitler created an us versus them atmosphere where anyone who doubted him was immediately branded as an enemy, even if they had once been loyal. This is precisely what Trump does. This use of fear and shame to enforce conformity, it's a hallmark of a fascist control. Junge noted that the use of fear and shame was constant. To maintain control, he needed everyone to conform or to be cast out. This mirrors what Trump is doing, mirrors Hitler's tactics of vilifying dissenters within his inner circle. He was always concerned, this is Traudl Junge speaking again, he was always convinced that those who disagreed with him were either weak or traitorous. He had little patience for dissent. He expected absolute loyalty. Fear was his tool. Again, I'm reading. He made sure that everybody around him was aware that questioning him could lead to ruin or worse. There was constant tension. No one dared to openly disagree, and many pretended to agree out of fear. Look at his cabinet secretaries. Look how they fawn. Look how they scrape. Ask yourself if there are any comparisons here. And I mean, obviously, there are. He divided, the Traudl Junge again, he divided the world into friends and enemies, and if you weren't with him fully, you were against him. Trump is the same way. When this internal dissent was sparked by the Wall Street Journal's expose on Jeffrey Epstein, which, as I say, has been a known issue for a long time. Who knows why it's becoming an issue now? Probably because Trump's base has finally found something that they can be impacted with. Trump escalated his attacks. He dismissed critics within his base, weak, foolish. This us versus them framing served to rally supporters by vilifying any wavering loyalty. Such tactics like shaming, intimidation, division are hallmarks of fascist leadership. Both Trump and Hitler used them to enforce conformity, silence opposition, maintain tight control over their movements. So, as I said, understanding these historical parallels is vital because fascism has been here for 100 years. And it's a favorite tool, and it's coming back again. We'll be talking about this a little more in the show. So with this in mind, let's talk about these polls are a little bit old. They're like from last week, but they haven't gotten any better, by the way. And the White House is said to be as close to being paralyzed by this because it won't go away, and they don't know what to do. They're attacking by distraction. The most recent thing that they've done is they're accusing Obama of being a traitor, and they say they've got the proof that he's a traitor. This is all coming out of the propaganda minister, Carolyn Leavitt. It's being picked up by Fox News, the propaganda television channel of the fascist right. And it's interesting stuff, these polls. I think we can say it's fairly representative. We've got Gallup, for example, the old reliable, well, sometimes reliable, Quinnipiac, CNN. So it's a ring. Right now we're told that, and these are a little old, but this is only getting worse. It's not getting better. The administration's desperately trying to stop this, but it's just like the monster that can't be stopped. 62% of voters are following the Epstein question. They think it's relevant. They're interested. 63% disapprove of the way Trump is handling the Epstein question. It's 63%. 17% approve Trump's handling of the Epstein affair. There's another poll, I think, that says of the American people as a whole, 3% approve of his handling or approve of only 3% disagree. On immigration, concerning Trump's handling of the immigration question, what's your view? Do you approve? 35% approve, 62% know that they don't approve. So this is Trump underwater on immigration by 27%. This is, quite remarkable. 27 points. So on the question of immigration in general, which is, do you think that immigration can be a good thing? 17% of Trump approve on immigration, 17% of him approve, 79% disapprove. Should there be a pathway to citizenship, which the Republicans oppose? 78% of the voters believe that there should be a pathway to citizenship for people who obviously meet all the prerequisites for that. Do you approve of mass deportation? 38% approve of the mass deportation. So in other words, most of the country, by 12% at least, disapprove of that. Trump's handling, so in other words, 62% disapprove. Trump's handling of the economy, 61% say they disapprove of Trump's handling of the economy. And this goes together with the 61% who disapprove of Trump's tariffs. And this is the thing. When you get over 60 on these things, this is a landslide, okay? Trump says anything he ever does, even if he loses, it's a landslide. No. But this, if you get over 60% on something, that more or less equates to the beginnings of a landslide. You want to reduce immigration? You think that's a good idea? 30% say yes, they do. 70% say no. Can immigration be good? 91% of Democrats are still, they say yes. We're still in the annual Gallup administration poll here. 91% of Democrats think immigration can be good. 80% of independents think immigration can be good. Now, Republicans, the base is included, although it's not identical. 64% of Republicans say immigration can be good, potentially good. Okay, here's Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac asks, do you approve of Trump's handling of the Epstein affair? The answer is 17% approve, 63% disapprove. 17% approve, 63% disapprove. 35%, more than a third of Republicans disapprove of Trump's handling. So one third of the Republican Party disapproves. So, I mean, we've got New Jersey coming up. We've got Virginia coming up. We've got the New York mayoralty. So that touches base on a few things. At this point, let's take another break, and this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake. Do you like what you hear right now? Support the real talk then. Go to patreon.com/Politics by Jake right now. Every dollar helps fight the noise. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. We're going to be talking about several things. We're going to be talking about fascism. We're going to be talking about, in this segment, we're going to be talking about Mamdani. We're going to be talking about the ultra-lefts. Try to stay with me. This is going to be a kind of an interesting segment. So, okay, let's start out with the best tradition of the Democratic Party of the United States. In general, it's going to be the New Deal Democrat, Franklin Delano Roosevelt-type leadership, competent, a winner, 4 times a winner. There's nothing that comes close. But the ultra-lefts say, and others say, no, we need socialism, because that's what works so well in Eastern Europe and in Russia and in China and in North Korea and all those places. And this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. So this is an element of the week or two after the Arizona elections. Mamdani showed up on Capitol Hill. They would have used this to say Mamdani is the conquering hero, because of the Arizona election. He's going to take over, and this is the future of the Democratic Party. If you hear that, that's going to be coming from your typical corporate media. The one that this show's called corrupt, controlled, corporate. As it was, he met with Jayapal up there. Jayapal, the congresswoman from the Taz. Do you remember that one? That was the judicial vacuum, the lawless zone in Seattle, Washington, part of her district, if I've understood correctly, where a number of persons were killed in this area. No law, no order, no cops, no nothing. So Jayapal swooned. Give me a break. Underlining that, including the fact that she signed prominently the appeasement petition for Ukraine in October of 2022. It must have been that when that happened. Jayapal was somebody who thought she could be Speaker of the House, and she will not be, I think. At this rate, she's definitely going in the wrong direction. So Grijalvo ran on food stamps, on Medicaid, on building housing. That's fine. The problem is with an ultra-left, and Jayapal is one of those, and at a certain point we have to say AOC is one of those. The problem with an ultra-left is they won't stop there. They're going to have something to say about Hamas. They're going to have something to say about Netanyahu. They're going to talk about why we can't have peace in Ukraine, why we can't negotiate with Putin. And the answer to this is easy, because he won't do it. He won't do it. So the media, and this is a principle now, understand, the media love ultra-lefts because they make the Democratic Party weaker. And it is in the controlled, corrupt corporate media's interests to make the Democratic Party weaker, more vulnerable, more on the defensive. So you need to have message discipline. You need to have organizational discipline. And that means stick to points that are essential. Mass traction economic demands, like we always say. What are those? Save Medicare, save Medicaid, save Obamacare, save food stamps, save SNAP, and save the other features, save LIHEAP, stop mass layoffs, raise the minimum wage within reason. Do all of those things. That's New Deal Democratic thinking. And if you're going to be a mayor, you know what? Stay out of foreign policy, okay? I mean, what the hell, honestly, what the hell does globalize the Intifada mean in context of being the mayor of New York? It means that you're making an appeal to people who are somehow out of touch. And it's amazing to me that people don't see it. Again, it has to do with, in my opinion, the tremendous penetration of postmodernism, which is the thinking of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And as I said, the echoes of the Paris mob, which Rousseau was contemporary with, and their fear of conspiracies, their paranoia about the world, this in its own way lives on. So, and I've mentioned this before too, if somebody comes forward like Hogg and says, I want to organize, I want to be part of the party leadership, I want to try to oust our existing office holders, all of whom have won who have won elections by definition. This is a kind of political infighting, you see? This is internecine warfare. This is it's destructive. And the only people it helps are the Republicans. And you think it leads to something more radical? I say it leads to defeat. And it leads to the biggest tragedy of them all. And here's the part I wanted to talk to you about social fascism. In the Germany and the Soviet Union of the 20s and the 30s, the central tragedy of the 20th century is where the KPD party of Germany, and that would be the Communist Party, KPD, under orders from Stalin, admittedly, said this, that the Social Democrats, and when I say Social Democrats, let's be clear about this, okay? That's the trade unionists, that's the employed workers, were not an ally but they were an enemy. And that therefore, the Nazi Party, much less dangerous, not just less dangerous, much less dangerous than the Social Democrats. That's the famous theory of social, or infamous as the case may be, of social fascism. Again, I repeat, because you need to understand this. The Social Democrats comprising there, but it's similar in the United States, trade unionists, here, unions and employed workers were the enemy. And that the Nazi Party, fascism, was not only less dangerous, but it was much less dangerous than these bourgeoisie. And again, when I say that, I'm referring to the workers. That means the workers. I agree. By the way, as an aside, I agree to those who say, what the hell does that mean? I agree. I agree. It's a little confusing, but it just means the workers. That's what it means. So what do we have today? We have the very same thing. Elon Musk, I'll talk about him a little more in a minute. He wants to attack Trump, but do you know why? He thinks Trump did not go far enough. So I'm here to tell you the notion of social fascism, it has not disappeared. In fact, it has never evaporated, not at all. And the idea that you're going to be more of an enemy of someone whose beliefs in the last analysis are somewhat similar to yours as a working person, a unionist, for example, rather than seeing that person as an ally, you see them as an enemy? Well, this is how Stalin thought. And this is insane. This is an insane way of thinking. And it's something that I'm still around. That's why I'm talking about it. Social fascism. This is social fascism. So we'll see all of this, okay? Cuomo is running. Fine. Trump was asked, what do you think of Mamdani in New York? And Trump goes through his usual one, which is that Mamdani is 100% communist lunatic. And that's the nicest thing, by the way, you're going to hear from national Republicans about Mamdani. And it's going to sit. It's going to land with a lot of people once you get this guy out there. It's one of those wedge issue, red button words or phrases that come from Lee Atwater. Well, I mean, it was Atwater who recommended that the Republican Party use such red button phrases. Obviously, they'd been around previous to that. It was kind of an offshoot of Nixon's Southern strategy. So my question earlier this week, I guess, was, Trump, if you really fear that a communist is going to take over your birthplace, right? And this is just all nonsense. Trump cares about nothing but himself, and everything that he relates to is motivated by himself. So if you really fear that a communist is going to take over your birthplace, your city, my city too, I'm from there, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you order Adams and Sliwa to drop out of the race? You could do that. Adams is at large, is a free man, thanks to you, and thanks to that guy Bove, who Trump is now trying to put on the Federal Court of Appeals. But even not friendly polls showed New Yorkers thought that when it came to actually governing, that Cuomo would do a better job than Mamdani or others. So Trump, if he wanted to, Trump could say, Adams, Sliwa, quit the race. I'll give you nice federal jobs. You want to be an ambassador? How about a nice tropical country? What would you like? Sliwa? Come on. It's beyond your wildest dreams. Adams? Come on, break out of this dead end. Get a change of scene. You're going nowhere as the mayor of New York. Get a change of scene. Nice federal job. Something like that. But he won't do it. And the reason he won't do it is because he needs Mamdani. Mamdani, and get me on this when I say this, Mamdani is going to be an increasingly critical part of the Republican strategy to hang on in the face of MAGA collapse that you are seeing now. And I think that this is important to see. So, you see, generally speaking, what we're dealing with is the demoralization of Western civilization. And I guess it's something you might say started during the Vietnam War. Large areas of youth around the world were horrified. I can correct it. They felt I was a part of it. Horrified by the Vietnam War. That's my time back then. Horrified by the Vietnam War. certainly determined not to be drafted, not to be forced into something that you politically didn't agree with. So the demoralization of Western civilization. That would again, it would be Europe. It would be Western Europe, I guess, from Poland on the west, North America, South America, Oceania, New Zealand, Australia, and large influence over places like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. But Western civilization is unquestionably demoralized. And it leads to people who are willing to swallow anything that said the old Rousseauvian ideas, Jean Jacques Rousseau, are bad. Civilization is bad. Technology, bad. Property, bad. Law and order, bad. These are all factors, so he would say, of corruption. And today, this critique tends to come, not surprisingly, from, and this is the thing, history has an impact on this stuff. That's why I always say I'm a student of history, and I use history to kind of weave into the tapestry, because we're not disconnected from what went on 1,000 years ago or more. So, keeping that in mind, the immediate rivals of Western civilization, which were the Byzantine Empire, and I don't like to call it that. It was the Eastern Roman Empire. Remember, they were around from 476 AD, when the Western Roman Empire fell, 476 AD, until about 1453 AD, give or take, a couple of years. So they went on. That empire, that Eastern Roman Empire, went on for an extra 1,000 years, an extra millennium. And then that was replaced with Muhammad the Conqueror. You got the Ottoman dynasty. You might say today the principal influence on much of the Arab world is exactly what the Turks brought and how they had absorbed a lot of Byzantine thinking. This is why you hear me talk occasionally, not a lot, about Peter O'Toole and the movie Lawrence of Arabia, because it's such a good movie. And I recommend that you watch it because it's a classic. It's absolutely a classic. It's on TCM occasionally. I recommend that you watch it. But it shows you the elements of what was going on. And they're the same things, basically, that are going on today. So you might say that the Turks had absorbed a lot of the thinking of the Eastern Roman Empire. And you could say other groups. You could say the Brahmin factor of Hinduism wants to regard themselves as the highest achievement of world civilization. Therefore, they're interested in this kind of agitation. They often take the leadership of it. That has been pointed out. What I think we have to remember is that this is not proven. That's about the nicest thing we can say about it. It's not proven. It's very partisan thesis. So it's important to hang on to what we would have to call Western civilization, unless, and until you can find something that really is better. And at the moment, I don't see it. So, again, we're happy to, and I'll qualify my words here. We're happy to welcome Elon Musk and his America Party. I think he's an exponent of root canal economics, ultra austerity. Like I said, he's worse than Trump. He's the one who says that Trump's austerity is not enough. And no matter how many victims we can attribute to the Doge, or the douche, as I like to call it, and the various cuts, the big factor of hope in today's world is that when evil fights evil, the good can benefit. And that is what we hope to see here. People say that third party never succeed, but they do. The Whig Party, that came out of nothing. It was simply people who were opposed to Jacksonian Democrats. The Federalists, they had disappeared in about 1815. The Whig Party, 1815, 1816, 1817. The Whig Party then appeared. It was never a well-organized party. They didn't have a clear program, but there it was, and they elected some presidents. They elected William Henry Harrison. They elected Zachary Taylor, a number of others, and that was a real opposition. So they then collapsed, and they were momentarily replaced by the Know-Nothings. And when the Know-Nothings collapsed because they had no answer to the question of slavery and sectionalism, That's when the Republicans, the free soil Republicans, and then the Republicans came into place. So a third party could theoretically prevail if one of the existing parties were to become extinct. And I don't think that's exactly what's going to happen, but it's a possibility. It's happened before. You've got to be aware of it. But the main thing is the Republican Party is now, as you've heard me repeat time and time again on this show, has been transformed into a fascist cult. And even some members of the cult, as we've heard just now, some of them say, I don't want to be part of this. And others still do. But any losses at this point, even 2 or 3%, certainly 10% mentioned by Bannon, this would doom this entire MAGA phase. And I ask you, isn't it about high time? 10 years after Trump came down the golden escalator at Trump Tower, I say it's time for this terrible episode to end. You've got to have a government that looks ahead. How are you going to dominate world science and research into the second half of the 21st century? Trump, on the other hand, seems to be concerned with the opposite. We've just had Robert F. Kennedy Jr., strong in his 14 years of slavery to substances. In other words, he's a coke addict, maybe a heroin addict, fired his chief of staff, is now looking for, I guess, a new chief of staff. We have measles growing, over 1,000 cases, part of a worldwide comeback for measles and so forth that began in either Tonga or Samoa. In other words, the gratuitous, the vandalistic, the anarchistic, the totally reprehensible, totally criminal destruction of research capabilities that the American people have invested in over decades, over 100 years. This has got to end. And the way that it is the need to take potential shown in those public opinion polls, begin to put that into the streets and more. This is politically where it's at. And what we need is not ultra-left sectarian demands, but we need mass traction economic demands. Again, the social safety net, the minimum wage, antitrust, an industrial party. And what Biden had well begun is to restore advanced production, quantum computing, biomedical research, the most advanced branches of modern production, and to make sure that those thrive. And not just in the right-to-work states, but in the entire country. Of course, right-to-work means union busting, so, we oppose that. We want to go back to the Wagner Act of, 1935, something like that. Not Taft-Hartley intrusion into that world that occurred 1946, 1947, just right after World War II. So there we are. That's our strategic overview. We hope you have a pleasant weekend, and God willing, we will see you back on Monday. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, I'm Jake with Twain Consulting. And if you're a business owner, freelancer, or entrepreneur, protecting what you've worked so hard to build starts with solid agreement. Imagine having agreements that make misunderstandings disappear and costly disputes a thing of the past. Get It in Writing is the all-in-one legal form package designed just for people like you, savvy entrepreneurs who want clear, enforceable contracts, whether you're hiring trusted contractors, leasing space, or closing deals that move your business forward. Get It in Writing provides easy-to-use, professionally drafted forms that save you time, money, and stress. Right now, you can get full access for just $99. That's 80% off the regular $497 price. A limited time opportunity you don't want to miss. Picture the peace of mind you'll have, knowing that your business is fully protected so you can confidently focus on growth and success. Don't wait until the unexpected happens. Take control. Secure your business today with Get It in Writing. Call us now at 213-465-0639 or visit facebook.com/Twain Consulting to get started. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now, We're going even deeper, and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together.